It's great to come up and be with you. I know several people by reputation, although I do know the Mascobetos. They were in South Florida at one time. And for some of you who've been around a long time, our worship leader is a guy named Jason Saunders, who has, he's put together all these videos of worship, but he's been with us for the last couple years. Got married down there and stayed and with us. And so he said to say hi to whomever knows him, okay? So, then I don't know who that is. So that's just a little bit about me. I came in and Johnny called me right away and said, would you preach on Sunday? I said, well, isn't that your job? But I finally said, okay. And then Tom turned around the next day and said, would you teach my group on Friday night? And I couldn't say no to Tom and Connie because I'm staying with them. So, I had to do that. So, but I'm here today with you. And I just want to share something. One of the most difficult things as you lead lessons like this is, not knowing exactly what you've gone through, although I can guess with the pandemic and stuff, and not knowing a lot of you individually is like, what do you speak on? So I said, I'm going to do something that's very basic. And I'll be like the Apostle Paul says, that you may already know this, and you may already be doing it, but I do not hesitate to remind you of what the standard is. Because, let's be honest, in so many ways, these last 18 months have been difficult for all of us. You think about, you're getting to meet outside. In Florida, we can't meet outside from April to October because it's 95 degrees and humid where I am. So thank goodness we have a building. We've owned a building for a long, long time. And so we have moved indoors, but to keep everything socially distant and keep things straight. And, we're the epicenter of the Delta variant now. There's just a lot of hassles. But it's been hard for all of us. And yet, as I talked to the group on Friday night, Romans 8:28 says that God works together for good for those who love the Lord. And so the question is, have we examined how this has been good for us to go through this? You turn on the news, you never hear, hey, the pandemic was good. And if you go through, I haven't heard a lot of churches talk about how good the pandemic is. But I've got to decide that if God says, if I love him, that what is going on now, we actually works together for my good, that changes your whole attitude about what's happening. Because instead of looking at what I can't do and what are the obstacles to obeying God, I can turn it to what is good happening in my life right now with my relationship with God. And I really encourage all of us, if you're a disciple, have you sat back and made a list of how this has been so good for you? And if not been good, what do I need to repent of so that God's word is true in my life? So that's where I'm going to come from, all right? And Friday night we talked about good for evangelism. People say, what? And we had a great time. I see several of the faces here. It's funny, I know you by face, don't know you by name from the other night. But we had a great talk about how this has really changed how we serve our neighbors and how we serve others, to be a real bearer of good news and not just doing the same things we've always done, relying on what we've always done. But I really wanted to talk about something that is the second part, I think, of what should be good news in our life. God has made being a disciple pretty simple. Not simplistic, but pretty simple. He said, love the Lord your God. In Matthew 22, verse 34, when they were asked, what is the greatest commandment? Jesus said this, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second one like it is love your neighbor as yourself. Upon this, the whole law and the prophets depend, and they hang on this. And so, he didn't say, okay, you have to keep a whole list of rules and look certain way on the outside. To the main religions in his time, whether it's from Judaism or even the Zoroastrianism, and even today, the difference between Christianity and what you and I are living and being a disciple and being religious is that we don't depend on a list of rules and regulations. How do we look on the outside? It's a matter of our hearts of, do we love our God first? And do we love our brothers and sisters? And guess what? That is true, pandemic or not. And so we got to ask ourselves, am I living out of fear, only looking at the obstacles of how hard it is? Or am I living out of faith and figuring out solutions how to really, first of all, love God, but also love my brothers and sisters like I love myself? And God promises that's going to be good for us. That's taking that step of looking for solutions to obey God, even during a pandemic, will be good for us. And it will change us. I don't know about you, but I didn't realize how much all the shutdown and quarantines, not being, as a church, we didn't meet all of the second week of March 2020, that's when everything hit. We shut down. We didn't meet all year, face to face. Now, we had great, I'm on a staff there. We have a staff of 18, and there's only 3 of us over 33, okay? And they all know how to do all the technical stuff and do all the Zoom and all, They understand why you like things and why you comment, and they encourage all of us older people to try to understand it. And they set it up right away, so we got good content. Our problem hasn't been good content. Midweeks, Sundays, everything. We've had incredible content. But the thing that I realized that had really affected me, that face-to-face, real-life relationships with people. I realized how indifferent I had gotten. It was a lot easier to roll out of bed and not have to worry about getting dressed and watching something online. With your cup of coffee, and if you wanted to turn you could turn your video on or off. If you didn't want people to see you on Zoom, you just turn your video off and you're sitting there eating. It was so much easier. And I realized how independent that we had, got, because, it was so hard to try to figure out how to have real relationships. Where Jesus said, love one another in John 13, as I have loved you. It was so easy to become religious, depending on watching things on video, sort of showing up, but hey, I got my life, you got your life, we're going to get it, and you had the perfect excuse. Oh, we got to watch out for the pandemic. And anything I'm saying today is not saying you don't need to be smart. I have to be smart. I have a 93-year-old mother down with me, and I'm not going to do anything to affect her getting COVID, and even though she's been vaccinated, and we're not saying don't be smart. Being safe and being smart doesn't mean you can't have relationships. You got to find solutions, even outdoor parks. This is a solution to worshiping together. You can actually do this and be safe. That's an example. But how about your individual, real relationships with brothers and sisters? Have you done the same type of solution with that aspect of your faith? Everybody's really quiet today. And I know I had to change. We had to change. We opened the church building at the beginning of January. We have a huge auditorium, so we could make everything socially distant and everybody wear masks that wanted to come. We still do it online because there's a whole bunch of people that shouldn't come because of their immunocompromised and comorbidities, or they're with people, their parents. So we understand all that. But I didn't realize how much I needed it until we got together face to face and really had times to love one another. But it has to go outside the church building. It has to go into my everyday life. Because this is easy to meet on Sundays. What's harder is Monday through Saturday of having those people really involved in your life. Now, why am I talking about this? Because in Ephesians chapter 2, I'm just going to quote today just for sake of time, okay? But in Ephesians chapter 2, starting in verse 18 through 22, this group of people is sacred to God. It says that when we meet together and we have the relationships and we break down all the barriers, because look around. We have races, cultures, ages here. And if we really develop the camaraderie and the community, and of course the way you can tell your community is not when you gather here, but when you do have people over, who sits around your dinner table, or who do you meet for dinner? You know, do you really have community with all types of people? You know, that's how you know you have community. But he says that this is built up into the temple of the Lord. Look at it. You know, as you look around here, fellow brothers and sisters, we are the temple of God. We are sacred to God. I know we don't use that term in the ICOC very much, you know. We're afraid of going back to high church of some sort. But, you know, it just says that this is a sacred time to God. That's why he's so interested in this. That's why he keeps telling us, love your brothers and sisters. That's why it's not an option to find out how to be good in my working for good of how I relate to my brothers and sisters. And then in Galatians 3, 26 and 27, he says all of us, we are the family of God. And yet, because we live in a culture of division and consumerism, that idea of sacredness of unity and sacredness of community can be overlooked. What do I mean by that? You know, we can think about it, this world. Right now, when you turn on the news, some of us don't even turn on the news anymore because there's hardly any good news. We live in a society that fights over everything. I mean, Simone Biles decided not to compete. Man, the things that were written about, you know, she shouldn't, and all this. I mean, it was nasty. Just because someone said, I'm not going to do gymnastics. You know, and, you know, we'll remember her, some of us will remember her for a long time, but, you know, the kids 15 years from now go, Simone Biles, who's that? You know, I don't know who that is. But, you know, how about all the politicization of everything, political parties, and, you know, we've taken health recommendations, and now I have to depend on what party you belong to. And everybody's concerned about their rights. It's my right to do this. It's my rights to do this. You know, and instead of, wait a second, what does this say about my relationship with my brothers and sisters? Because when we meet here today, we're making a temple of God. And we're brothers and sisters, not by title. Brothers and sisters, that's how God looks at us. So ask yourself, whoops. Well, that's my phone's gone. I really have to quote now. But ask yourself, what are your relationships with brothers and sisters really like right now? And for those of us who are parents, I've been around for 48 years in the churches. And I've seen everything in 48 years. The good, the bad, the ugly, and I'm usually the ugly, okay? But I can say this. How you deal with this pandemic and stay strong with God and other brothers and sisters will affect your children for the rest of their life. They're learning what it means to love God with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love someone else like love yourself by the way we deal with this pandemic.
Right, amen.
That's why this is so important. And I know you know this. You've heard, we need to love each other. And I don't hesitate to remind you, because the pandemic has scared a lot of us, we're living in fear instead of by faith. And being shining lights to this world. And this is true all around our churches. I mean, this isn't just South Florida. This isn't Broward alone. This is all of us. Why? Because we're all going through the same thing. And I'm speaking not out of perfection. I'm speaking out of, I know I had to repent. I had to change my mind. Because basically, I'm a pretty independent person. You just ask my wife. She always complains. She says, you could get along fine, because I'm a really independent person. And this pandemic just made me more independent. Yet I had an excuse for it this time. And I just had to say, wait a second. God said this. What am I going to do with it? And it's exciting. Because, we live in this, think about it. We live in a society where we make things commodities. What do I mean by that? Well, what can it do for me? What can this do for me? And if I don't think it can do anything for me, I can just stop it, change it. And a lot of people think that way about churches. Oh, I don't like the singing. I don't like the preaching. I don't like the people. I don't like this. So I'll just go find someone else because it doesn't do anything for me. And it leaves out the whole thing where it says in Philippians 2, it says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but consider other people more important than yourself. Or Paul in 1 Corinthians 12, when he says, we're the body of Christ, he says, no one can say, I don't need you. The head can't say to the feet, and the eye can't say to the mouth, I don't need you. We need each other, even more during this time. But do we have the faith to find solutions how to do that? Or are we just letting fear and seeing all the obstacles? And, that's too hard. That's too hard. That's too hard. Am I making sense? Okay, great. I know I can read the audience in Broward because I know them. If they don't like me, I know that I said something really strange because that person did something. Here I can't tell, so I have to ask every once in a while. All right, but and we got in 1 Corinthians 10, and this is a really challenging one. But in 1 Corinthians 10, I think it's 23 and 24, says we have a right to do anything, but not everything's beneficial. We have made church, we have let the society creep in to the church. If we start talking about our rights, we're talking like the culture. We're not talking like the Bible. And he says, yeah, you have a right to do anything, but not everything's beneficial. You need to look out for the good of others. And I quoted Philippians 2, that's where it says it too. Do not consider yourself, but consider other people more important than yourself. That's hard, isn't it? To consider other people more important than yourself. That is so unnatural. You have to be spiritual to do that. Because you can't be just religious. You can't be just coming to church. You got to have the Spirit living to do that. And even then we fail, and we have to ask for forgiveness and ask God for forgiveness over and over again. But the command is still there. Consider other people more important than yourself. And guess what? The pandemic's been good for us to learn this. It's working for our good to make us examine that. And it's a high calling. I know it's a high calling. It's a high calling for all of us. How do we love like Jesus loved? Because all men will know we're disciples by the way we love each other, not by our singing, not by our doctrine, not by leading such good, somewhere along the line we let this creep in. I'm going to lead a good life and influence others. Forget it. First of all, they don't even know you're living a good life most of the time. They're not looking at you, they're looking at themselves. But second of all, we only show them our good parts. We don't show them what we're really like. You see, because loving people is messy. Loving others. In this group here, I know in South Florida we have people all from all over the islands and Central America and South America and a few gringos like me there, that I was born and raised in Illinois and lived in Maryland and all that. Loving other people that are unlike you is messy. It's hard. I can remember going like, why do they do that? Why are they so loud? I started a campus ministry at Howard University way back, and I remember going into dorms at Howard University, and my first thing was, they're just so loud. They're all loud. I'm this quiet guy, Why are they so loud? Because they were all just yelling at each other and everything. It's because that's how they were raised. They were just they'd make a party out of everything, and I'm like, what? But because you're learning to love people, it's really hard, especially one like us that aren't like us. And the challenge of this group here is not look around on Sunday morning and say, hey, wow, we're really diverse. The challenge is how many people unlike you who are raised differently than you are in your life and you're in their life. That's the real question of learning to love like Jesus loved. And it's one of the hardest ones because all of us will let commoditization and consumerism seep into our lives, and we'll go and to the people we're comfortable with. We'll pick groups that we're comfortable with. Like right now, we're rearranging we call them community groups. We want them to be community. Some people call them family groups, life groups. Everybody has different names. But we're encouraging all of them to blowing them all up as much as we can and saying, pick people that live around you, no matter if they're single, married, from the islands, African American. Pick people that live around you. Why? Because if we're really going to be a community, our group has to reflect our community and learn to love one another so that the community, when they look at us, they'll know we're disciples. They'll know we're disciples. We can't let anything destroy the temple of God, brothers and sisters. We can't let anything destroy the family of God. And I don't have time for it, but there's a whole, Matthew 18 about reconciliation. It's not merely I forgive. It's am I really reconciled with those who've hurt me? I've been around 48 years. I can tell you some stories. And I'm still reconciling some relationships. Because it's hard. But that's what the temple of God drives me to. Because as we end, the reason is because Proverbs 4 says, above all, guard your heart. Guard your hearts. And that's what our brothers and sisters can do for us. I appreciate Mike sharing about communion and all the things he went through, and he's talking about all the ways people really served him. Why? Because to guard his heart, he needed others. He couldn't do it on his own. And guess what? We may not have his issue, but all of us, we can't do this on our own. And the pandemic needs to teach us that in much deeper ways. And also in 3 John, 3 John's a little book many of us don't read. It's only one chapter. But it says, starting verse 2, it says, Dear friend, I pray that you may enjoy good health, and that all may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along well. We're talking about our souls here. So the question today is, how has the pandemic been good for you? You waiting for things to return to normal? Well, I tell you, if normal is what we see, I don't want to go back to normal. Normal of the division and the hidden hatred. The pandemic has just revealed what's already there. All the politics that have gone on. And I'm not here to say any right or wrong about any politics. I'm just saying, if we do not govern our political stance by what God said of loving one another, we've missed the boat. Doesn't matter right wing, left wing, up wing, down wing, round wing, it doesn't matter. What matters is, are we loving like Jesus loved? And are we overcoming and really being the family and the temple of God and listening to one another? And why is it so important as we end off here? Because our relationships, the quality of, the lack of, the depth of, affects our salvation. You know, John wrote in 1 John chapter 4, it says, if you cannot love your brother whom you do see, you cannot love God whom you don't see. So brothers and sisters, I hope this can encourage all of us to see how good God is and the good he's done in each one of our lives, so we can follow him the way he wants us to follow him and be a shining light to this world. Because there's no other place. There's no other answers. Political parties, economic systems, going home to wherever home is, they don't create solutions. Only Jesus Christ and him crucified and the Spirit working through us will make us shining lights. Thank you very much.